Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Welcome back to some more Warpforge as always. And I'm excited to be back making some videos, and I've been trying to do more of the community content to get like y'all voting and letting me know what you're interested in. So thank you all for participating in that. That's kind of like an easy, quick way for me to kind of check in with y'all and just engage the community even when I can't really be working on videos. Going through some transition in my professional life, but I'm thinking things are going to improve with our ability to put out content. And just to kind of check in, I think we'll be seeing all of the data coming out from this past season. We did not hit the leaderboard, unfortunately. We made it to 65. I was grinding at the end. I really was giving it a bit of a shot, and really felt that Ultramarines and specifically Calgar was my best builds and kind of felt the most comfortable on it. But I think Swarmlord has really proven its worth, and so now I really just need to grind out the level 20 Forge, to make sure that my Swarmlord build is, tip-top shape, for this potential new season. We will get a balance patch at some point, and to kind of focus us in on the video that we're doing today for Morvenn Vahl, because I got the most votes for which deck tech they wanted to see. I think that Sisters definitely are in a pretty rough spot. Morvenn Vahl, I think, is probably the most viable competitive warlord right now out of the three, which is upsetting because I would like to see all of them be somewhat viable or have their niche in the meta. And really Morvenn, because she's got extra health, kind of a better utility, I would say, in general. She just tends to perform better. But we're going to go through 2 wins and a loss today just to kind of showcase how the deck can win, but also in certain matchups. It just feels like you're playing like a baby Warpforge over in the corner, and then your opponents are playing like big boy Warpforge. And it's not a great feeling, as I'm sure other people have experienced too. So thanks as always for the support, the likes, subscribes, all of that. We're actually very close to 600 subscribers. Very cool stuff. Definitely working our way slowly but surely towards 1,000 subscribers. So thanks so much as always. So what are we doing with Repent for Your Sins, which I thought was like the most edgy. This like reminds me of like a terrible screen name from like, someone's first like AOL instant messenger, but I just thought that was hilarious. So what are we doing? Obviously, we're not doing anything too revolutionary with this build. I've tested a few different things. I do not have all the cards in my collection. I've got quite a few now to really be able to play these decks. But I've been generally pretty happy with this build. Now, it's still early days. I probably only have like a total over the last, week or two, 20 games with Morvenn, maybe a little bit more. So, I would say take this build a little bit with a grain of salt, and also we'll see what the balance patch says. But if you were to ask me, Tim, what Morvenn Vahl builds would you go out on the ladder with, I think it would look something like this. So to really quickly go through it, Devout Warriors is just your card advantage spell. You should be playing it. Flagellant, just, I think, I'm thinking more and more about this card as like fully a tempo play to keep you in the game, rather than like, oh, I'm going to save this against the Tau, like to board clear their stuff. Sure, you might live the dream and you might deal, 2 damage to everything, maybe 3. There aren't a ton of ways you could do that. But it's honestly good for punching essentially for 3 and then letting your Warlord, specifically Morvenn, who has, the boost to power, ephemeral ability, to just clear like a 4 or 5 health unit for, anywhere from 2 to 4 energy. So it's just a really nice tempo play. Beacon of Faith, I think this is a card, again, that kind of showcases like something is wrong with these faith numbers. 6 faith is just extremely high for a pretty low payoff. I think Beacon of Faith feels like a little bit of a necessary evil to win in the mid and late game. But this needs to be changed to like 3 to 4 faith, and even that is going to be hard to achieve in a lot of different matchups. So unless you're playing against very, very low tempo warlords, control oriented stuff, you're going to really struggle to get even close to this number. But I still think Beacon of Faith, performs a pretty important role. Prayer, said it before, in my first kind of delving into Sisters of Battle video. It's just a really efficient card. Being able to guarantee a faith is actually pretty important at certain points in the game, but also you can just shield a unit if you really feel like that's going to make it harder for them to clear. I'm not going to say that all the time you'd be doing that. I feel like you're mostly using it on your Warlord to guarantee a faith and kind of like gain some tempo back, but Prayer has a little bit of versatility in that. Preacher, feel like this card, I know why you would want to start with like pretty bad stats overall, because this card can just snowball very easily. But again, you're not hitting this 5 faith almost ever. So it just like, if this were maybe 2 or 3 faith, okay, maybe the stats stay the same. Or honestly, if you want to keep the faith level, which whatever, then just buff the stats. Like maybe this should be a 2/2/4, right? That means that you're almost guaranteed to see the next turn to use Hymn of Battle. And I think the card gets its value if you're able to do that. But when you play this, it gets cleared by pretty much everything, and it like hits for 1, you're just like, what's going on here? But again, with where the card pool is at, there are just what I would say necessary evils that you have to play in these decks, and I think Preacher is definitely one of them. Blade of Faith I've been trying as one of, been pretty happy with it. Again, maybe if this faith requirement gets lowered, it becomes like a much more viable card, 3 energy for 6 damage. But for now, I probably wouldn't run more than one of it, honestly. Cleansing Flames, however, has just continued to perform very well. This is one of your best tools to stay even in the early to mid game. And with the fact that Morvenn can do that free 1 damage without having to take any retaliation, is really good combined with things like Cleansing Flames. So I feel like this is a card that they really got right. I don't really think it needs to be tweaked. I think if it was 4 damage to 3 units for 4, then we'd be getting maybe a little too friendly to the sisters. But for now, I think this card is like kind of perfect for where it is, and I've enjoyed playing it. Hallowed Martyrs, I think, is really annoying to deal with, and I'm glad that they made this change to 2 random enemy troops. A lot of people are still not really thinking about how they're attacking when someone does this, but again, there needs to be some sort of indicator on a Warlord that has cast this, because it's very easy to lose track of it, even for yourself. Spirit of the Martyr, maybe I should be running 2 of this card. I think maybe even the Ecclesiarch has had that in his build. This card can just do a ton of work for you. Deal 1 damage to all units. If a troop dies, repeat it. So this also interacts with Hallowed Martyrs. So you can basically clear a board with like the multiple effects, because it's going to keep triggering that. But more importantly, and we'll get to talking about the power of this card later, it also can turn on Mortifier to really help close out the game. And we'll actually see that in one of the videos. One of the battle logs that we're going to look at. Which is all ranked. Season just reset, so I just went on ladder and played some games. Astrid, still really, really great. If you do not deal with this unit, it's going to snowball. It is relatively easy to deal with. I think she's almost a little bit better in Erica, because you're going to Erica her up to 7 health. And 7 health is a pretty rough breakpoint to deal with by turn 6, right? Like, that's a veteran Storm Boy plus your Warlord. You're going to have to work for it. So Astrid is still just a very essential, very good. Divine Intervention, I hesitate to say lower this faith requirement, but I think you need to, because this by itself is like okay. Divine Intervention, right? Like, destroy the enemy troop. Again, a necessary evil, because this faction lacks like the ability to have reliable removal. You have to play this card. But the fact that you're basically never going to play this for destroy all enemy troops does feel, yes, 5 energy to do that is incredible. Like, that's an incredibly powerful effect. But I would love to see this reduced maybe to 6, right? Like, 6 is like, if you've snowballed and you've done what you needed to do, you get rewarded. But 8 is really rough. Or this could have some other requirement stat, right, where it's like just wipe the board at 5 or 6 faith, right? I think giving some conditionality or modality to the card would also make it more viable. Speaking of viable things, it's kind of crazy that we're running Dominion Superior, which is a common, but it's actually just super efficient and obviously a good penitent enabler as well. So this card is just solid. I think it's probably one of the better 5-drops. It's unfortunate that some of the 5-drop rares are just like Canoness is just not it. So maybe when the buffs come through, we won't have to run this card. But I think it is actually fairly good for what we're trying to do. Celestine Sacrosanct. So before I started this video, I ran a couple games with like a little bit of a lower curve. And I had the camouflage unit that deals 2 like on its penitent. And I just am really unimpressed with most of the early game units from this faction, as I'm sure most people are, right? They either have way too low health, way too bad stats, like even trading into them doesn't feel like you're losing any tempo. Yeah, it just feels bad. And I think what happens is Morvenn can be very good at using her Warlord ability to keep the board clear, but then you're using your life to do that as a resource. And you almost, from when I've played this deck for a bit, I really think that you need Vanguard units to try and get some stability in the mid to late game. I think Celestine Sacrosanct is again sort of a necessary evil. I don't love units like this. I don't really love the one that's in Ultramarines either, because again they have such a deficit in their ranged attack that it's just not that hard to take advantage of the imbalanced stats. But I think you kind of have to, because Celestian, which is the 3-drop Vanguard unit that prays for a shield, is just way too weak. Now, if Celestian gets the buff for that 3 energy troop, I think you'd rather run that. You'd rather have a cheap Vanguard unit you can maybe double spell in a turn, and if they're not able to clear it because maybe it has 4 health, or it's just got even better attack stats, so it's annoying to trade into, then maybe I would cut this. But for now, I actually was like, you know what? Even though I've got 4 other 6-drops, I think I just need this card. So I still want to do more testing with it, but I think for now, I've kind of settled that I kind of need some sort of beefy Vanguard unit, and Sacrosanct is probably the best one. And you're almost always going to pray with it the next turn. You don't need to attack. You just need it to sit there and allow you to then reset up your board. Then we come to, as I've deemed him, Penny. Penny is great. Penny is necessary. You're going to ping this, going down to 6 health, but then getting the flank and the blast. And this thing can absolutely run away with the game if they don't deal with it efficiently. You can even just play it, and it's still whopping 7 health that they're going to have to cut through. So that card's been excellent. Seraphim, again, I think you need flank units that are guaranteed. I'm looking at you, Seraphim, to be able to have flank and play. We're not running the 4 energy flank unit rare Seraphim because it's not guaranteed. So again, I think you have to, when you really see how hard it is to accumulate faith, I think you start cutting faith cards pretty quickly, unfortunately. So, or certain prey cards. Now, Mortifier, I am super happy to be running 2 of this card. At first, I tried 1 and 1. I didn't want my curve to be too top-endy, in certain decks. But actually, I think ending at 7 for this deck has been pretty fine. I mean, we could even go bigger with, the Exorcist or some of these other huge tanks. But again, they're pretty lackluster. But Mortifier is probably one of, if not your best way to actually close out the game against certain decks. It has a huge amount of health. And it really does so much more than like a bad Calcius impression, because you have things like Hallowed Martyrs that could trigger off of Spirit of Martyr. Obviously, Hallowed Martyrs doesn't hit your units, but Spirit of Martyrs like triggering things and clearing the board. This can really go off with Mortifier. You've got, you can also combo that with your Flagellant, right, and other things that's going to allow Mortifier to just absolutely pound your opponent. And again, in the mirror match, if you play this and your opponent has Hallowed Martyrs, it's just an infinite loop, as long as this is the main card that's receiving the damage. And then, of course, wrapping it up with Saint Celestine. So, which is just, real, very, very good unit, very hard to deal with. So this is the shell that I've been working with. I think that there will probably be some tweaks at some point, especially when things get balanced. But we're going to get into some games just to kind of show what the build can do, and also really what it suffers from in terms of like its weaknesses in matchups. But we got to start with the absolute banger game into Abbadon, which was kind of a sweet one to showcase a little bit, and really look at the strengths. So here, you know, they're not putting out a ton of pressure usually with Chaos early. So I don't really want to, but I don't want to have a Mortifier kind of stranded in my hand. So I keep these 3 because Celestian Sacrosanct, I really wanted to, again, try a little bit after I'd put it in the build. And then Hallowed Martyrs is pretty annoying to deal with, and most people don't really know how to attack into it properly, and then Arcoflagellant to keep the board clear early. So I feel like this was just a solid hand. And being on the draw with the Forge level that I have isn't great. Like, Sacred Altar just doesn't really do much at all, to be frank, but... You know, I guess it is a guaranteed 1 faith. So if we get to sneak in another faith, maybe we'll turn on the superior. So here, we're just going to get this out of our hands so we don't have to worry about it. And then you're pretty much always praying, unless I would need to use my Warlord ability. I'm not trying to race Abbadon. I need to get set up first. So, obviously going to be attacking us pretty much always to stop us from praying. And here is where you might not always use Flagellant, but it's just a guaranteed... It's just guaranteeing me the ability to clear this card, because it's going to deal 3 damage to that, and then I just get to ping this off, right? This is how I like to play Morvenn. I don't know if it's always the best way, but I kind of play them like Ultramarines, where I'm like, my job is to just clear units early, and that's it. I just need to survive to get to my bigger units, and then sort of close out the game from there. So we kind of luckily hit another Flagellant. We're going to do the same exact thing, except we're going to buff this. And I made a mistake here. So I should have buffed Flagellant to deal 3, then it would have dealt 4, and then I could have pinged here. I did play Preacher, and so I took a different line, but looking back, I'm like, this card's probably not going to live anyway. I'm not sure that what I did was the best move. So that is some of the skill with Morvenn, I think, is like, when do you buff some of your units versus trying to curve out. And again, it's here that I'm like, look, I could try and him a battle and do all that, but I think I just need to keep, especially against Chaos, the board clear. If they snowball at all, it's going to be so hard for me to remove their units. So we end up basically doing whatever we needed to, plus Superior to clear that out. And then they play a Venom Crawler, but luckily we've got enough power to really deal with that. And it's here we're going to use Righteous Repugnance to punch this for 5, and then we get to ping it for 1, which is really nice. So that we don't take any damage to the face. We need to keep our life total as high as possible. We're going to play Hallowed Martyrs because we have essentially a turn off to do that. And now it's going to make it a little annoying for him to set up a board into Hallowed Martyrs. It's not the end-all be-all because they usually have massive units. But it's still pretty annoying, right? So it's going to ping this for 6, which is actually really crucial. Ping this down to 6, rather, because then we can clear it with the Seraphim. So, again, really all we've done is just answer every single play since 3 energy to try and keep our life total high and remove things off their board. I'm not going to stick around to try and hit 3 faith. Definitely just fire that off. So we've got pocket mortifiers in our hand, so that's really how we want to close out the game here. So they're just going to set up a unit here. But again, it's going to take a damage, so it's going to be pretty easy for us to clear. So it's here that I'm like, great, let's set up the Sacrosanct. Let's use Righteous Repugnance to clear. Either way, I would have to attack it. I guess I don't technically have to do that because of Mortifier. So that was... It's great. I'm realizing that was also a misplay. I didn't need to spend 2 energy. I could have played out the Gunner. So that's a good note for me. But our opponent has a really good response. They're able to whittle down the Celestian and then just kill it off with Spawndom. This is pretty much how games go against Chaos. You're kind of fighting for your life every bit of the way, and then just hoping that you can set up a board that they can't really deal with. So here I know I have to play a Mortifier and just try and get the game turned around. And just hope that they don't have a response. So here I'm going to ping my Mortifier to guarantee 2 damage. Because 8 health is still huge. And we basically have to close out the game in the next like turn or two. But we've got a really good way to do that with Spirit of the Martyr, or potentially Cleansing Flames. So it's a decent spot to be at this point in the game. But here, Therian gets off a nice Black Crusade, and I'm just praying they don't have a Vanguard unit, but they do pull the Havoc Champion. And it's basically from here that I'm like, all right, well, I have to win this turn or I lose the game. And I don't think I really had enough to do the math here. I just kind of went for it. So it's good to be able to watch it back. But I had to kill that because I need to punch in for 6. And then that's going to deal an additional 4. Because actually vulnerability counts as 2 ticks of damage. So vulnerability actually allowed me to win this game. Because then it's going to be another 4 damage to the face. And then we've also got Spirit of the Martyr. So we were able to just completely Mortifier machine gun that guy down. It's just another 4 damage. They're at 4 health. So this was pretty sweet comeback. And vulnerability actually gave us kind of a hookup on that. So Mortifier and vulnerability is definitely an interaction I had not thought about, but is actually pretty beneficial when you're trying to close out the game. So pretty sweet game, very, very quick for the most part. You know, pretty scripted, and I think that is kind of how you have to play things, is just trying to keep the board clear and keep it pushing. Now let's look at a Calgar video and kind of cry a little bit, because Ultramarines have always kind of been the masters of tempo, and this faction just really suffers from tempo loss. So yeah, so we keep 2/2 drops that are probably not going to live, but you know, maybe have a shot. We're also on the play, so we're just going to run out the Preacher and ping them. And we've got Thurga, which is really nice. And, you know, we're pretty much going to play a similar game, right? It's like you don't want Space Marines to be able to build their board. You just want to kind of keep things clear and then hope to close out the game later. But this is a solid play. They've got the Sergeant, which is funny because I've really come off running this card in Calgar specifically. Yeah, so now we have to deal with this unit. We don't have a way to clear it. So here I just go for max damage, because if I play Battle Sister Gunner, it's just going to die immediately. And then I go for the Devout Warrior just to fish for a unit. But essentially this has hit us for 6 in the face, which is really awful. It's just like we're already down 4 life. They're going to play out their flanker, which is going to be annoying for us to deal with as well. Morvenn's really good at taking out 3 health units. But anything over that is just going to be a bit of a slog. So here I'm like, all right, let me ping this. I'll play both of my 2 drops. Maybe something will live, or maybe I'll get my prayer off. Not that it's terribly important with this deck. Whereas with Erica, you sort of have to. You have to be able to pray. And that's part of Erica's weakness, is turning on the second part of her Warlord ability. But we're going to get that video up on the channel too, and I'll definitely do some more testing. So honestly, I'm not terribly upset with this turn. Like, they've had a pretty efficient turn, but like they've had to use several cards, you know, to get rid of our little 2 drops, so that's fine. And it's here that I could play Astrid, but I wouldn't be able to clear a single unit, and then those units get to trade to kill Astrid. So I'm just like, you know what? I just got to use my Warlord ability to keep the road clear, and then maybe set up Astrid for a later turn. So it just feels really bad that, you know, it takes a lot of resources to stay in here. But Cleansing Flames is actually a perfect draw. This allows us to clear their whole board, which is excellent. We just Righteous Repugnance our Warlord, punch the Primaris Impulsor for 3. So, you know, this is kind of how they look. But again, I'm having to use my health pool to kind of keep things clear. So, you know, it all just doesn't feel really great most of the time. And they have a great turn here. They've also got Tactical Insight to just make both of these units huge. And again, we don't have any sort of like really reliable kind of like mass removal. So this is going to mean probably that we just have to Divine Intervention something and then like ping something. It's just like pretty depressing. If we had a Flagellant, this would be a much better turn, but we just don't. And if we play Sacrosanct, it's just going to get absolutely mowed down by the range deficiency that it has. So if this even had one more ranged attack, I think it would be a much stronger unit. But 2 is just so low at this point in the game. So yeah, we take 5 from this thing. Then they're able to Polixis it back up. Like, it just, there's not a lot I can do here, right? Like, their board is continuing to be established. We're super low on life because we've had to use it to clear things out. It's just pretty much the worst of all worlds. So, I think here, just trying to use Flagellant to try and get as much damage on them as possible, and then use our Spirit of the Martyr to clear things up. So we do manage to do that, but we're also just taking a ton of damage in the process, right? So Martyr does allow us to clear here, but then we're behind by 14 health. It's just like, and we don't have any healing, right? So this is just pretty bad. It's possible that maybe I should think about running like the armor stratagem that heals and things like that, but I've liked how this build goes if we're able to stay at parity on the board or ahead. But yeah, when the thing is with this faction, when you fall behind, it just doesn't really have any comeback mechanics, because everything is kind of based off you establishing a board or being ahead on board, and this game is kind of designed for you to tug of war with your opponent. So it's just, Warpforge is not very kind to this Sisters of Battle design. So this is going to be really hard for us. We don't have any way to deal with this Librarian, so we're going to have to play our Vanguard unit. But this is a case where having this Vanguard unit was our best chance of not dying here. Well, we have 3 energy, so let's play the Faith. We're nowhere near 5 Faith, unfortunately. And then ping it, so we just try and get back. But obviously being at 6 health, they're at 10 energy, they've got 22 health. There's pretty much no way that we win here. So, I don't know. There's not much lesson to learn here. I think it's just that Ultramarines are always going to be a tough matchup. I think Orcs to some degree are kind of a tough matchup. Yeah, just a pretty clear showcase of why Sisters of Battle can struggle. And then I think we'll end with not a typical matchup we're going to see, which is against Zephyrblade, but I felt like this was an interesting matchup to kind of showcase like a different type of I guess like tempo. And so, you know, obviously Zephyrblade can clear any 3 health unit. So this whole hand is basically just garbage. So I just throw it all back, trying to find something else. And here I definitely take the, what's it called? The Infinity Circuit Surge, because I have a 6-drop in my hand. I have like nothing to do. So definitely just starting higher on the curve is going to be better for me. And we're not trying to race them, right? So we're just going to take the free 1 damage all the time, which also requires them to attack us. So, but thankfully, you know, starting out here, as long as a unit has 3 health, we can use Morvenn to clear it. So that's going to kind of keep us in the hunt. And we've actually got some nice, you know, 5 drops, 6 drops that we're very close to being able to play. And hopefully from there, we can kind of, you know, stay ahead of our opponent. We have 0 way to stop them from getting the Spirit Stones. So they've already got 3. They also have the defense card to do that. And this is pretty unfortunate because I know whatever unit I'm playing out here is just going to die next turn. But I have to play something. So I play the Dominion Superior after going for my ping ability. Just to be basically the meat shield for whatever happens here. Honey, I know. I'm giving the video attention and not you. But I swear she knows. I could be working here all day, but it's, as soon as I start recording, she's got to hang out. So yeah, they're able to trade their 3-drop for our 5-drop. Pretty awful. And they've got another one, right? So again, we're just in a rough spot of like them being pretty far up on tempo. So it's here that I just want to have to start the the sacristan, because it's the unit I care the least about, and it should be somewhat hard for them to punch through, even though Shuriken can kind of chew up armor a little bit. Armor is generally hard for them to deal with. So they do end up sinking multiple attacks into this card. So it kind of does its job, right? I'm not taking this to the face. And if they want to remove this, potentially I could pray, but they actually use Eldritch Storm, which I think is pretty decent application of the card here. But thankfully, we didn't get hit with a high roll one, which could have chipped us for a lot of damage. So it's here, we get the ping, which is fine. They're going to get the Spirit Stone, and we're just going to slam our Mortifier. And this is a good position, because I know that they're not going to have a great way to deal with Mortifier, having 9 health. So this is kind of where, and even this, it's damage based to stun it, so they're going to take 2. And so they can obviously clear this at some point with some of their flankers, but luckily our opponent doesn't really have that this turn. And so they're going to try and set up. They have to kind of hit our face, but we're actually up a little bit on health, which is nice. And we're just going to try and play, some of our heavy hitters here and just stay ahead on board. So now we get to play Penitent Engine. And we have a lot of options here. I choose to go for the Repugnance to just kill their unit. I could have also given this Blast or whatever, but I'm kind of thinking if I keep the health high on 2 different threats, it's going to be really hard for Eldar to deal with both. So we're in a pretty ideal position from here. So managed to get that free stun again, which is pretty good. And I guess they have to Eldritch Storm here because they have nothing else. And so they're going to end up taking 4 damage from the Mortifier. And they're going to end up giving 4 blast to our Penitent Engine. But they're able to clear the engine, which is the right thing because this is stunned. Here I probably would not attack just because they're behind on life. But they choose to. We're not even praying at this point, so there's no attack needed. So I think there was like a little bit of a mistake, just bleeding 2 health that they didn't need to. And now we get to play Thurga and another card, and here's where Beacon of Faith is great, right? Because they've chipped this down to 2 health, but now we get to pick it back up to 4, so it's even less likely that this can get cleared by Shuriken. And then we get to ping them for 1, get a shield. We've got a bit of a board going now. So again, this is just making it super hard. And so they are going to clear this Mortifier, but they're taking 4 damage this turn to do that. And we're actually ahead on board now. So pretty ideal scenario for us. And my guess is that Morvenn will do fairly well into some of these mid-range or aggro strats. I think she will suffer into other late game or tempo-based matchups. And Eldar tends to be fairly tempo-based. I think this was a bit of an unfortunate draw for our opponent, from what I can tell. So they're dead 6 ways to Sunday here. We've got the Cleansing Flame to cleanse their souls. And that's going to be a GG. So, yeah. Again, I would take some of these games with a bit of a grain of salt because, things are going to change probably with balance as well. And I think I'm not going to claim that my build is the end-all be-all. I'm missing legendaries. And I think that the overall card pool is kind of restricted because things are quite underpowered across the board. But I've actually had quite a bit of fun with this build. And so if you are a Sisters of Battle fan and you are trying to compete, in this first week of the season before balance changes, and it might be nice to get familiar with Sisters of Battle before the balance changes so that you can kind of go in and maybe get a little bit of an advantage when you're deck building with them because you'll know kind of what's good and what's not post balance. I think this is a decent place to start. I'm definitely going to get a deck up for probably each of the Warlords, Erica and Junith. Junith is definitely going to be kind of the weaker of the three. I think Erica can be great, especially when she snowballs. But Morvenn feels more like she doesn't require faith to operate decently. All she requires is building her deck to focus on tempo in the early turns and having the right matchups where you can clear some of their early units, and then you start slamming your 6 and 7s and just hoping from there you have enough life to work with. But I think in some matchups she does it pretty well. So, and also you can kind of blindside your opponent about like vulnerable or hallowed martyrs or some of these other like weird interactions that people are probably still not used to. So thanks as always for sticking with me. Definitely let me know what you think about Sisters in the comments. I know there's been a lot of chatter. I can say very confidently across the board they are underpowered. They do need some buffs. I don't want them to break them. You know, I don't want this to be the reverse Tau where they start weak and become broken. But I really would like for them to be more competitive. I think they're sick. I think they're awesome. And I hope to see more of them at a higher win rate. So other than that, I will catch you guys, as always, in the next one.